right, guys, welcome to the FFL League Review, our inaugural episode here with myself, the commish. Of course, over here to my, it would be my left, we have the bearded ginger, Ben, and of course, right here below me, the professor, Rose City Thorns owner, Zach Zurwell. So, guys, welcome. Excited. This is the first time we've done this in the FFL, our 15th year, no better way to kick it off. But first, I'd be remiss not to talk about the biggest news around the league. Of course, earlier this week, our defending champion, Nick Smith, he was put on the commissioner's exempt list based upon his actions. So removed from the league. Don't really want to spend a lot of time talking about it. I think everyone already knows what happened. But into the league comes John York. John is a good friend to a lot of the owners in this league, but also an excellent addition, a lot of fantasy knowledge, immediate contender, someone who I think we all look forward to having. So quick thoughts on that. I know, Zach, you played in a lot of leagues with Mr. York, the Hamilton County Cougar Hunters.
Absolutely. He has, cat-like mobility?
That's exactly what he tells us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. No, he does a really great job. He is super smart about things, really great at managing his team, and also just a great person to have in a draft room.
Yep, absolutely. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and cover what we consider the best day of the year, our Christmas, the FFL draft that just took place a little over a week ago, kicked it off on Sunday, September 1st. And, I want to go over what happened in the first round of that draft. And so I think the best thing that we could do is let's talk about some of the best picks of the draft. Of course, we had the nightmare kicking it off with Saquon Barkley, and it's kind of hard to argue against that. But I'm really interested in how we view the first round, how it panned out. So, Ben, what's your thoughts on what was the best pick of the FFL's first round?
Honestly, when you're talking about value, the simple fact that DeAndre Hopkins fell to the 10th pick after keepers, so putting him at the 22nd pick of our draft, is who I think will end up being the number one rated receiver in fantasy by the end of the year. I just think the amount of targets he's going to get out of Murray, I think how they're going to scheme for him out there, that's going to be the value pick, I think, of that first round. I kicked myself wanting him to fall to me. Happy with my pick, but definitely would have jumped on Hopkins right there. So for Chad to get him that late in the first round kind of astounds me, especially in a half PPR league.
That's the Greens Fork Black Demons, Chad Kircher, two-time FFL champion, and over the last 6 seasons has the highest win percentage in the entire league, who got that value based upon pin. Now, Zach, what was your pick for the best pick of the first round?
I really like the Joe Mixon pick that Oldie made. Getting that type of running back that late is pretty spectacular. He could be the top back in the league if things break the right way, if Burrow comes in and does some awesome stuff like lots of people hope he does. So I don't know. I love it. I really thought about him hard at 6 instead of, it was really a toss-up between him and Tyreek for me. So.
Well, let me tell myself a little bit here, because I expected you to go Joe Mixon. So Joe Mixon falling to 7 where I was picking was not expected. But what I had on my big board was Tyreek Hill, then Devontae Adams, and then Joe Mixon. So I actually am going to say Tyreek Hill was the best pick, and that's a pat on the back of a guy I didn't want to have to give a pat on the back to because he's right here on this with me. But I really like the Tyreek Hill pick because Hill, even though last season missing multiple weeks with the injury to his shoulder, was still able to finish as one of the top wide receivers in fantasy. You look at what he brings, and it's game-changing. It's a guy who can win you an entire week. And if you have the right roster construction around him, you don't really lose a week when you have Tyreek Hill, because he said he has such a big boom opportunity that just him alone can win you a week, but his floor is so high still. So I love that pick. Now, we have to talk about what we consider the worst picks, and we're going to go back around, and I'll kick this one off. And, to me, there was one choice that I thought really stood out, but I'm going to probably let one of you guys take that one, and I'm instead going to turn my attentions to the last pick of the first round, and it's Mike Evans. And the surprising part about that is I like Mike Evans. I've actually owned him, I think, three straight years. At some point I had Mike Evans on my team, but there's something that tells me that right now, coming into, this season, Jameis Winston was not a good quarterback, but what Jameis Winston did really, really well was push the ball downfield, basically with his eyes closed. And when you have a 6'5" wide receiver who could just streak down the middle of the field and jump up and grab it, that's great. You know what Jameis Winston was, though? He's about half of the age of Tom Brady. Tom Brady, with Bruce Arians' offense, probably looking a lot more at those checkdowns. And now they've added multiple running backs. That should tell us that their scheme is to go more towards a run-heavy offense, kind of similar to what the Patriots did last season. And now you actually add Chris Godwin, who's going to play more of the slot this season. And so what I think is Godwin's probably the guy to own there. And I'm not sure I'm sold on Mike Evans. Now, given the board and things like that, I think there's still a good case to be made that he was likely the best wide receiver available at that moment. But to me, I think the ceiling's a little limited there. So, Zach, what's your pick on the worst pick of the first round?
Oh, it's really close on two of them. And I'm going to definitely have to go with the Miles Sanders pick.
That was my other one I thought as well, but go ahead.
Yeah,
elaborate.
It's just like he did it for 4 or 5 games, maybe. A second-year player, we're hoping he turns in and does a Le'Veon Bell. We're really hoping if you're picking him there, you're hoping he turns into something. You're not taking him based off of what he actually is. He could be Tevin Coleman. He could be one of those backs. He doesn't necessarily see things very well. He doesn't have it all together yet. So that's really scares me. That high in the first round when you have running backs later like Joe Mixon that we know are awesome.
Right.
We don't know if Miles Sanders is awesome. We're hoping.
Well, and of course the injury during the preseason festivities, within practice, he had an injury that we weren't sure what we were going to see, but they said he should be available by week 1. In a information coming out left and right from all of these camps, when you hear should be and not he will be, that's another big red flag. But Ben, what's your thoughts? What was the worst pick of the first round?
To come a little bit out of left field with it, I'm going to have to say Clyde.
That was my other one.
So it's a little bit of what a player he is, but what player was passed up to take him. When we look at having, a half PPR league and you're taking a rookie running back over Michael Thomas after the year he just had, I'm kind of questioning it, especially when you look at the Chiefs' offensive line last year. Ranked, bottom 4 in any kind of rushing stats when it came to how the linemen actually made the push, led the league or tied the league in sacks with 58. And I think it also comes down to how many top players are going to be off that team that are going to help you win a fantasy league. So you already have a top quarterback, you have a top 5 wide receiver, the top tight end. Does another top person at their position come through in a running back? And I feel like when you're making that pick that high up in the first round, you're picking your stud for the year. And, the Chiefs aren't looking at him as somebody I don't think who's going to run off 1,200 yards and get you 10 touchdowns or, catch the ball 60, 70 times. I think they're looking at him as somebody who's going to get him 700 to 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, and going to help them win. But I don't think he's going to help win a fantasy championship.
That's an interesting thought on this one, because if you look at roster construction, having Christian McCaffrey already on that roster, you have an incredibly high floor. And the idea of fantasy football, right, is to make sure that you are scoring the most consistent points you can week over week. So to go for the surprise, possibly home run pick of Clyde Edwards-Helaire there, it's kind of the why shoot for the moon when you can have the sky. Why go ahead and shoot when you could add Michael Thomas? And imagine a Michael Thomas, Christian McCaffrey lineup being rolled out against you. I completely understand that thought as well. Now, something that we didn't talk about in the pre-show or before we got on this, but I did want to bring up is I was looking over at some of the picks that were made throughout the rest of the draft. And I thought, if you guys had a moment to maybe reflect back, look at some picks and maybe just really made your head spin, if it was a surprise pick or if there was a pick that maybe you thought was an incredible value given where they were landed. And I'll give you some time to look at those real quick, because one I wanted to talk about was, and this is, you just got done talking about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. In the very next come around, for them, that team, and then of course new owner now. But they take Jonathan Taylor in the second round and come around and take Kareem Hunt in the third round of the draft in front of guys like Mark Ingram, Le'Veon Bell, A.J. Brown, Cooper Kupp, DK Metcalf. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, Keenan Allen. And it was very surprising, I believe, at that moment to see Kareem Hunt go. The conviction was that Kareem Hunt needed to be got there, because if he wasn't, he was going to be handcuffed sooner than when this owner would pick again. But that one really stood out to me as one of the biggest surprise picks. Really reaching on a value and a projection there. So anything stand out to you guys as far as a surprise pick?
Well, talking about Kareem Hunt still, like even if you do believe, and I do, like it's very possible that the Cleveland Browns could have 2 top 12 running backs this year. But you don't have to take him there.
Yeah.
You know, like even if you believe that, like I believe that's definitely a possibility. But he could have waited, 2 more rounds at least?
Probably at least 2 more.
Probably 2.
I wasn't looking at him as a handcuff. As the Nick Chubb owner, I didn't really care, because my thought there is if Chubb goes down, granted, it'd be great to have Hunt, but that type of value that I'd have to spend on that pick there didn't make sense for the roster construction, where I could get other valuable running backs who I could fill into that spot. So I totally agree with that. Ben, what about you? Anything stand out to you?
I guess Juju going as quick as he did after the year he just had. Watching some of their games last year, you can almost kind of tell. I don't think he's a number 1 receiver or someone who can make things happen on the field himself. I think he's a great number 2 that when Antonio Brown was there could definitely capitalize on the space that he was given. Last year, granted, we had Duck Rogers throwing to him, so you can't hold it against him too much. But I mean, you had Odell Beckham go after him, DJ Moore, Allen Robinson, Adam Thielen, even Amari Cooper, all the way down there. Guys who produced last year and are set up to produce again, especially Thielen without Diggs from across from him. I just thought it was really early for him. Something tough when you're picking at the end of the round. Something I had to deal with this year. When you're making that last pick on the come around, you realize that you're not having another pick for another 20-something picks.
Right.
So you kind of get in that mindset of, man, I love this guy. I don't know if he's going to be there. And sometimes when you look at those picks, it can almost look more like reaching than what they really are. But I think that just has to be considered a reach right there. And there's plenty of other value for that was the Black Demons at that position.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I think one thing we learned about Juju is his value is certainly tied to his quarterback. And if we all know one thing about Big Ben, is he's likely going to end up in a walking boot at some point this season. He'll still play through it because that's what the Steelers do. Zach, you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, one thing that I really noticed about the draft was how far awesome wide receivers fell in general. There are lots of wide receivers that could finish as number 1 receivers that fell even like to round 6, or it would be a 5 with the things. Like Brandon Cooks was in round 6. If he doesn't get a head injury, like he could be awesome. Stephon Diggs was also there. How long Keenan Allen lasted when Chad picked him up, I was kind of floored by that.
Same.
Amazing receiver. Even how far like guys like Adam Thielen that we know, like they're just locked in as awesome people or awesome wide receivers that like he's going to score tons of points. And it seemed like it was kind of like an overreaction to last year when top wide receivers, like we're drafting wide receivers so high and a lot of them didn't work out. And now there was so much value this year and lots of people really benefited from that if they were looking for it.
Well, it's interesting as well because the roster construction of this league, you're forced to start 3 wide receivers. You also have a flex position. So realistically, you can fill up a roster out of wide receivers that are going to account for the majority of the scoring for your team. So to see those studs fall, I think it's that pendulum swing that we see every year in fantasy. This year, the wide receivers are booming, so everyone goes wide receiver the next year. Suddenly, the running backs have more value because they're being picked later. And then the next year, all those running backs go up in the boards. So we see it as a constant swing. But with that being said, one of the most fun things about today's podcast or vlog or whatever you want to call this, is we're going to talk about the team ranks put together by our very own Zach Zurwell. And I'm interested in his perspective on each team. I know Ben and I want to have some insight into some of this, especially given some of the rankings and who you got number 1. But no, let's start with number 12. I'm really interested in this. Let's count them down. Let's hear your team ranks, and we'll go through on how we feel about them as well.
All right. So as I'm talking, go ahead and pull up his roster. But the team that I think is in the most trouble out of the gate is Jay.
I would agree.
As I'm looking, there's so many rookie picks. He's what 4? At least 4 rookies as I'm looking.
Just in starters, he got 3.
Swift,
He's got 3 starters.
Judy, Ruggs, and then CD Lamb is probably the next, is his first guy off the bench.
Yeah.
So he's counting on at least 3 rookies to hit this year. If you look at the rest of his roster, there's not a lot on the bench that can fill in if those rookies don't hit. That's going to be hard. Also, his keeper was Lamar Jackson, and he had an all-time QB season last year. And then if you guys remember, like in thinking back on past seasons, once a QB has that all-time season, record-setting season, we all know what happens the next year.
Yep.
It's always regression. Can he really throw that well to make sure, like, that was a lot of touchdown passes for how good of a thrower he actually is.
Right.
The running is absolutely amazing. But I think those throwing touchdowns have to come at a lower rate. Like they have to. He also spent a primetime pick on Travis Kelce where, yes, do you want a good tight end? But when we're looking at the rest of his roster, maybe there could have been something better than taking, when he's relying on this many rookies, like, would you rather have, a more locked-in running back or wide receiver there and kind of, tight end? So that's tough for me. I know Singletary, Mike Evans, and Will Fuller are the 3 pieces that I really like on this team. I think Devin Singletary is the man. That Zach Moss stuff I'm not so worried about. Devin Singletary has amazing traits, his balance, things like that. Like, he's awesome. And you can score a lot of points not scoring touchdowns. And not all touchdowns come within the 5-yard line. So Mike Evans, we don't know what the offense in Tampa Bay is going to be. We can guess, but it could be 2007 New England Patriots and not what we've seen for the last couple of years. Tom Brady's not had a wide receiver like Mike Evans since, like, Randy Moss.
True.
So we have no idea. We have nothing really to compare it to besides
he's got 2 of them now.
Randy Moss. Yeah. So
he's got two of them now.
Yeah. So really, I think to make the playoffs, Jay needs Lamar to have another record-setting season. He also needs Travis Kelce to be the best tight end in the league, and he needs at least 2 out of the 4 rookies to be viable every week, locked-in starters.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, if we weren't going back into a reset year, I would say, having some of these young guys might prove useful for somebody who, let's say Swift breaks out in the last 6 games and you're able to switch him out for somebody going into the playoffs and a little more consistent because somebody wanted him as a keeper. But that's not happening this year. And, in the positions that he was grabbing them, there's a lot of value just around there that he kind of missed out on just by grabbing these rookies like DeAndre Swift, who of all accounts sounds like the backup even before Adrian Peterson went there. Now sounds like the maybe change of pace back. The 2 picks after him were Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, Mark Andrews, Robert Woods, even Raheem was after that pick. So I don't knock grabbing rookies, it's when you grab rookies like that, you have to make sure that it's at a good value. And I think that's where he messed up, is that none of these were at a great value. And now your season's kind of hinging on, Lamar repeating, which honestly, defenses figure out offenses. And I feel like if they stop that run a little bit better this year, you're not going to have those wide open passing lanes that he was scoring those touchdowns in. They're going to be more contested. Singletary, I do think, was a great pick. Fuller, I disagree with you on. I just think he's hurt so much, and he had that one great game last year of like 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, or something crazy like that.
You sound like a Boilermakers fan. Yeah, hating on those Notre Dame prospects. So do I, though. Well, I tell you what, if we put it really simply, though, I mean, we look at Jay's 5th round and the 7th round, where in the 5th round he took DeAndre Swift at the top of the 5th round, and then at the top of the 7th round he takes Jerry Jeudy. Where he could have went, and again, hypothetically, but top of the 5th round, Keenan Allen, top of the 7th round, Tariq Cohen. So if you come out of this draft with Keenan Allen, Tariq Cohen versus DeAndre Swift, Jerry Jeudy, you're probably feeling quite a bit better. Now, granted, this come back around to bite us. Who knows? Because last year, Jay also had Marquise Brown. We saw what Hollywood was able to produce, helped him win quite a few weeks. And Jay had a lot of rookies last year that carried him to a championship game, not to a full championship. But, by asterisks, he's basically our champion right now. So Jay's probably going to laugh at this and probably be angry. He'll show up in a polyester suit next year. Jay Jacket will be back, and we'll stoke that fire. So now, who do you have as the 11th ranked team in your rankings?
That would be Nick's team, Nick Clevenger.
Ah, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So Wayne County's finest.
Yes. So what's going on with this team? That is, hold on, I'm still pulling it up. He really went all in on Colts running backs, both of them.
Yeah.
Which, as a Colts fan, I hope works out, but not necessarily as a draft strategy or as a play-in strategy. I'm not really in on that. He's got some good wide receivers. DJ Moore, Tyler Lockett, John Brown. I don't hate any of those wide receivers. But when your running backs are Miles Sanders, Jonathan Taylor, and Marlon Mack, like there's no number one. There's not huge firepower.
Where's the floor basically with this team?
Yeah.
And maybe DJ Moore, we saw it, but of course there's an offensive change there, a new quarterback in that system. Granted, probably a better quarterback, but does it play to his skill set? Is he basically Michael Thomas, a possession receiver, or is he more the streaker, the flashy kind of wide receiver? And do we see these other guys take a step in? I completely agree with that.
Well, and then also when you start to look at his bench, it gets hairy down there. What he really needs is, like, if he's going to be competitive, he needs 0 injuries on his team. And there is no upside on the bench, really. Besides Ayuk's pretty nice.
I like Claypool.
Yes, I shouldn't say no upside, but if you're talking about
again, you're relying though on a rookie, an injured rookie at that.
An injured rookie, but he's got Darius Slayton, Blake Jarwin, Alan Lazard, Chase Claypool, Raquel Armstead. But like those players they're not gonna vault up anywhere and make this team better. Like they're just kind of placeholders.
Right, guys that if they were on the waiver wire right now, I don't think I would put a bid on a single one of those guys.
No, and he's like I said, if any of these guys get injured, he's gonna have to put guys that should be on the waiver wire in on his team.
Right.
Well, so he has Deshaun Watson and Darren Waller. And those 2 things, so you're drafting a QB and a tight end early to get those 2 things. And I think what we're seeing here and what I've noticed is when you draft a tight end and a QB early, man, that really hurts your team.
It does.
It really does.
I mean, I think that honestly the biggest thing that hurts his team is the fact, like, when's the last time that we've had 2 running backs from the same team that you felt comfortable with starting both of them every week?
Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara, but that's not this situation.
No. And how long ago was that now? 3
a few years. Yeah, I lost to that championship team.
So those Chiefs teams, and there have been teams.
That's an outlier.
Teams, but I'm talking about, who he just the amount of people he just traded for Jonathan Taylor. You're hoping you trade for that. You're hoping he's a number 1 running back. To have his back, or hopefully his backup for him. also be your starter, it shows some problems, especially when you look at the backup running back that he has is Armstead, who has the corona. Other than that, he has no running back. Now, he has some receivers that he could slot into that flex position. It's just when you're rolling with that slim of an edge or of, oh, crap, like you said, I have an injury. Who are you plugging in? Now, for me, I love Tyler Lockett. I love Tyler Lockett more than anybody probably. But
I don't say you wear a heart locket.
No, yeah, the shortest guy ever to lead the league in a red zone. What sort? Crap.
I think the word is Nick Clevenger. Hit up Ben because he's ready to make some trades.
No, but I do love Lockett. I have Metcalf though, so I won't touch that. But John Brown, I think, regresses this year. I don't know. I don't see how in that offense he somehow gets better than last year. When you add Diggs into it, I don't see. I mean, they're definitely not changing to a pass-first offense, and I don't see your second receiver getting better stats, I guess. So having him as your third, I think, really kind of hurts you, especially out of that system. Miles, yet again, if that's your bell cow, which I mean, if that's what you're kind of hoping for with the first pick, I think you're putting a lot of hopes on seeing somebody running for 8 games and hoping they can do that for an entire season.
This roster kind of reminds me of Jay's. I need a lot of guys to hit to have a high floor. And so ultimately, I think Deshaun Watson provides a good safety net. I think DJ Moore is going to continue to be possibly a wide receiver 2, but probably in the wide receiver 1 discussions, and Darren Waller. But at the end of the day, you need Sanders, you need Taylor, you need a guy like Lockett or Marlon Mack to combine with Taylor to where you can start both running backs with confidence. That's just a really, really hard gamble to make. So, Zach, who is your 10th ranked team in the FFL?
This one would be Tyler, and it's not a surprise because he was not present. And we know when you're not at the draft, your team sucks.
Sounds like a guy who was boating.
Yes, definitely. Taking a look at his running backs, it gets just from the beginning, it's bad. His number 1 running back is James Conner. His second running back is Ronald Jones. His third running back is Tariq Cohen,
which I like.
But I think he's going to need him to be a starter.
Correct.
I don't like that. His fourth running back is Benny Snell.
Yes.
Okay. So
the handcuff to James Conner.
He does have Peterson on there, and depending on how the Lions use Peterson, that might not be too bad of a pick by him. In all honesty,
I don't know.
I'm just saying, not a lot of teams sign a aging running back like that to the guaranteed money that the Lions did if they don't plan on using them.
So there are some good pieces on this team. Having Mahomes, Sutton, Julio, those are great pieces. But we know fantasy football is running back dominated, and Tyler's clearly going to get dominated. And this is another roster when you're looking at, because Mark Andrews was an early tight end and Patrick Mahomes is an early quarterback. And the thing about these first 3 teams is they've had early round picks either on, like Jay was an early round tight end, but these other 2 had early round QBs and tight ends, and it really hurt their rosters.
Yeah, I think roster construction really comes into play here. I agree about the running back assessment. I know that Tyler has been hunting in the trade market for additional running backs, but at the same time is very confident in some of the key pieces that he has here. He looks at the ceiling of Deontay Johnson as being very high, which who knows? We don't know what Deontay Johnson's going to look like in that offense this year. Guys like Mark Andrews, who looked very much the part of a top-tier tight end last year. Does that offense take a step backwards? Do they become more focused on their rushing attack with Dobbins and Ingram? We don't know. So that's kind of the questions that surround this offense or this starting. But I do kind of like a few of the pieces that he has on his bench, and I think that the big key to that is that it only takes 1 week for Rob Gronkowski to look the part again. Now, do I think that he is going to be some dominant tight end or play great at that position all season long? Most likely not. But if he comes out week 1 and has himself an 80-yard, 2-touchdown game, Rob Gronkowski is going to pull, I don't know how much away from guys like Oldham and guys like Chad. I mean, let's just be honest though. Gronkowski was a stable for a lot of guys who won championships in this league, and so when they see Gronkowski back out there and going, "Wow, he's only he's younger than Julio Jones," so if they're playing him as a top end like wide receiver, lining him up, I saw where they lined him up on the outside on some of their practice tapes. If they have Gronk lined up on the outside and they still to utilize his size towards the when you have to defend against the guys like Evans and Godwin, suddenly Gronkowski becomes a pretty big prospect to have there on your bench. So I kind of like some of that roster construction as well.
Yeah, that's kind of like looking at this. So I wouldn't necessarily say this is a bad team, but I think that this is a how good of an owner are you team. So when you're looking at his bench, like I'm looking at what? Cohen, Gronk, Peterson. I'm looking at some very heavy trade bait going in the first couple weeks, depending on how they do. And you can see him flip a lot of those pieces, especially like him talking about, or Brad talking about Gronk, into, that running back that he needs. Obviously, I don't think, Ronald Jones is what you want in that position. I did like his Julio Jones pick. I thought that was pretty dang good. Personally, I said I loved Hopkins and would take him there. But getting Julio, Sutton, Mahomes, I'm always under the impression that, unless your scoring is different, taking a quarterback that early is really going to hurt you in the long run. And, looking at this team, where it hurt him was running back. And it's going to be kind of on Tyler to make this into a playoff team, which knowing him, I think he can, but it's going to hinge on, coming out of the gate, a couple of those guys having good games and having that trade value and being able to get, 3 or 4 starters from Oldie. So
I would agree. So that's Tyler Hamilton, the Hollywood Hogs rookie owner, coming in at 10th. Zach, who is number 9 on your list?
Well, I will say that the next about 5 teams were pretty close together. So the order it's an order, and definitely how I see it, but it's take the order necessarily with a grain of salt. I think the next 5 teams all could be playoff teams if they're managed well. Those first 3, those owners are going to have to do a shit ton of work to be able to get to sniff the playoffs.
Going into the middle of the pack.
Yeah. So now we're into the middle of the pack. The one I have here next is Cody with his team.
Bucks of Plenty.
Yes. And really what it comes down to for me is he drafted some of his top players are just players that I personally do not like. If you like these players, his team looks a lot better to you than it would to me. Derrick Henry and Amari Cooper are just people that are on my do not draft list every year. Derrick Henry, he had a good run at the end of the season, but we're really going to count on a Tennessee offense led by Ryan Tannehill to be that successful again this year. If you had Derrick Henry the first, 8, 9, I don't even know how many games it was, that wasn't fun.
Nope. I'm the one that had him.
Yeah, I was to say, we know from experience, right, Ben?
Oh, yeah. No, maybe that was a different league, but yeah, Zach, I completely agree with you on the Henry thing, especially how many carries that he put on at the end of the season. You're talking about he was running between 22 and 30 carries every game from the last, 3 or 4 games into the playoffs. They had the deep playoff run, counting on Ryan Tannehill. You're looking at Dalvin Cook, who is talent-wise a top 2, 3, 4 running back, but he gets hurt. And I think you got to take that into account. But I'm the same way as Zach with this team. I have a do not draft list, and it's always subjective. I have people on there like Odell, even though Odell can perform. I have Cooper, Henry. So if this team on paper looks really good, but there's a lot of factors that can kind of ruin his season. Do the Buccaneers come out and be a more running team and dump off team where Brady's getting 200 yards a game and 2 touchdowns? Is Cook going to stay healthy? Is Henry going to stay healthy? Who the hell? I mean, I guess Trubisky will be throwing to Robinson, but will that offense be doing anything? I think Cooper gets his. I think Brown takes a step forward. But there's a lot of ifs on this team that I'm not necessarily sure break Cody's way.
The other thing I'm thinking is, as I look to his bench too, I don't see a lot of upside. There's a lot of kind of role players there.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not in on I'm a Devin Singletary guy. Like Zach Moss could probably be okay, but I don't think there's ceiling there. Sammy Watkins, like you get one good game out of 4, like good luck starting him ever when you have a bye week. Like it's not going to be one of the 4. I can almost guarantee it.
I'm going to tell you, I actually disagree with this assessment, not just because Cody's my boy, but I'm going to be honest. When I looked at his roster, I actually really liked it, but not necessarily because these guys are guys that I personally wanted on my team. But when I look at it, again, I look at a floor that's pretty high. And, I think that anyone in the fantasy community would say Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, great start at the running back. We can play the what-if scenarios, the injury scenarios, all of that. But when we come at the end of the day, every single one of us in this league has a question at the running back position if we really look hard enough, and so I look at this and I go, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, that's a heck of a nice floor to have as a running back tandem. When I see Allen Robinson, Amari Cooper, Marquise Brown as the wide receivers in a 12-man league, I think that's really good. Now, what you're counting on in this type of roster is the New York Giants to take a step forward. Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, you're looking for them to be that consistent target monsters to stay healthy, as we said before. But I actually am not a Devin Singletary guy in the least. And so there's a lot of things on his film that did not pop to me. And so when I saw Zach Moss, I saw a guy who can break tackles, who can run a type of offense that the Bills run, who is much more of a thunder in between tackles type runner. And so I do think Moss is going to carve himself out a role into this offense. And I think he could become a valuable weekly starter on this team. So personally, I actually think Cody had one of the better drafts in this league because of the floor that he has. Now, Tom Brady, to me, quarterback is very interchangeable. If you don't have one of the top 5, 6 guys in this league, it doesn't really matter. There's no sense in drafting that 7th through 12th guy because, I believe the last quarterback that came off the board, or one of the few that came off the board, was Aaron Rodgers. And Zach, you owned him. And so there you go. If you change that quarterback position from Tom Brady to Aaron Rodgers, are we going to knock this team further? Or no, we're going to probably say that's fine. So, so that's where one of those things where it's the floor for Tom Brady, we already know there. The ceiling could be incredibly high. I personally don't think he's going to score that many fantasy points, but you can go out on the waiver wire right now and pick up 2 or 3 quarterbacks who are going to score you a top 12 week every week. He could stream quarterback if he wanted. And Brady carries a name. He was a guy who's been on 6 championship rosters in this league's 15-year history. So there's that as well.
Now, Oldie will go get him.
Well,
no, on the floor aspect of that, just looking at his bench, I will give him credit that, a lot of us are storing guys who we hope have places in offense because, we haven't been able to watch preseason games. There's a lot of people on his bench that have places in their offenses. Now, if they get better, that's one thing, but, Sammy Watkins has a place with the Chiefs. Curtis Samuel has a place with the Panthers. And I think it's a decent bench to have as opposed to, even compare mine. I have a couple running backs, so I don't know if they're going to see the ball this year. So to have a bench like that, I think does make his team look a little bit better.
Oh, we're getting ready to talk about your team right now.
Oh, wow. Coming in at number 8, then let's talk about.
Oh, 8 is great.
Right. So this team looks like a team that myself or maybe Ryan Cowan or Doug would have drafted several years ago.
So it's a hipster team. I like this.
So hipster. I looked up all the ages on all the players. So you've got 2 guys over 30 on your team, and that is it. That's it. You've got Jared Cook as tight end, and that's a throwaway tight end pick. You know what I mean? And then LaShawn McCoy. But besides that, your next oldest player is Devontae Parker.
Wow.
His second oldest player is Austin Eckler.
Interesting.
So his team has a very small track record of performance at the NFL level. So you're talking Kenyon Drake, who's had
Pre-game?
everywhere that he's been, but then also gets relegated to backup everywhere that he's been. Calvin Ridley is he's still young. We know he's good. DK Metcalf, same thing. But with younger players, there's still a lot of that inconsistency. Josh Jacobs, absolutely love him. We're talking a second year back. That gets hard. Noah Fant, Alexander Madison, Michael Pittman Jr., Darrington Evans, Daniel Jones, and Kyler Murray are your QBs. That's so young.
I got to say, I also love Josh Jacobs, but he took a little step back for me today when I saw the news about Dari Ogunlumble, who might be signing there, which tells me that this Raider staff is still not sold on Josh Jacobs being a pass catcher. Do I understand that? Not at all. Do I think that he's very good in pass pro, though? Not really. So maybe that's the tell that they're trying to give us. But that is something that took a little step back for me. But when I looked at this team, I really liked a few of the ceiling guys because I was like, wow, this guy could really blow up this year. Austin Eckler could finish the year as the number one running back, and I wouldn't be shocked. And I'm just being honest. I would just be like, yep, that makes sense to me. Josh Jacobs could do the exact same thing. Kenyon Drake and that offense could do the same thing. But in reality, we're kind of, this is a enhanced version of what we saw with like Nick Clevenger's team or even Tyler's team, where we go, man, this could be a really good team if these guys pop. And so now we're to the point where it's like Kyler Murray. If he takes that next step and he becomes the next number one quarterback, because sophomore quarterbacks in this league tend to take that step forward, and then it's their third year in the league where we see the regression. So could Kyler Murray finish the year as the number one quarterback? Yes. Could Eckler finish as the number one running back? Yes. So I go all the way down this list. I think where it hit for me was I don't trust what Devontae Parker brings to the table. I don't necessarily trust that Calvin Ridley is going to be a top 12 wide receiver, and I don't trust that Kenyon Drake's going to be able to stay healthy for an entire workload. It's not really been in his pedigree, but I do like that the fact that this bench has a guy like Alexander Madison. It was joked about when he was drafted, but, I look at someone like Dalvin Cook, who is vying for this new contract, and, a guy that's trying to get a new contract, maybe he's going to try to play through some injuries, or maybe he just says, no, I'm not going to play through this injury. And suddenly Madison's the guy. Is Madison a top 12 running back if he's the featured starter? I don't know. I think it's an acquired taste at that point. But I kind of like a few of these pieces, and I kind of tend to agree a little bit with Zach that this is going to be a team that would scare me if I'm playing them in the playoffs, but would not scare me if I'm playing them in week 3.
Really, Ben, what you need is everybody to be better than they were last year. Like every one of these picks is kind of I think this guy will be better this year. But it's all the pick stuff.
So that's what I tend to argue on it.
Let's go, argue.
All right, just to defend
we're kicking someone out tonight.
My team, Kyler Murray, rookie season, finished as I'm pretty sure a top 10 quarterback over the entire year. Austin Eckler, what you saw him do by himself was outstanding. Just by picking him, it's a top 50 or top 20 receiver and a top 15 running back all together. Josh Jacobs, while it's not including him in the passing game is worrying, but just the sheer amount of times they just handed it off to him when you're like, it's 3rd and 14. What are we going to do? Hand it off to Jacobs. And so DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley, I see actually as really high floor. I don't think Calvin Ridley is going to take that step forward and be a top 15 receiver, but I can guarantee you he is finishing between 20 and 25th. I think DK Metcalf does take a little step forward, but I think he's going to finish around that, 15, 20th. I'm looking for my running backs to pay off and my receivers to hold steady. The one pick I really, really, really didn't like was the Kenyon Drake pick. I picked Eckler over him in the first round because I don't have that much faith in Drake. But coming back around and seeing what was, seeing the running backs that I was going to be able to take further on, and this kind of comes back to what I said earlier about when you have that back-to-back pick, you kind of look at, well, crap, what's going to be there on my next pick, 22 picks from now. And I had to sit there and say, Drake is probably the best upside, but I'm still shaky on him as well. Like, there's not too many players that, you have 3-4 great games with one team, but, why couldn't you do that before? Now, the Dolphins are a black hole of NFL talent that just sucks him in and doesn't let him back out. But is he going to be able to do that? Is he going to be able to be healthy? And, without preseason, how much of this running back, goes to committee with the Cardinals? How much is Chase Edmonds coming out of the backfield as a receiving back? Like, there's a lot of questions that preseason would have been nice to see, especially with Drake, but I didn't get that. So I do agree. It's more of a high upside team. I could see this team being out of the playoffs in like 6 weeks, or I could see it as being number one going into the playoffs. And I'm happy with what I got where I was drafting, but we'll have to see.
Hey, you know what? Stand by your picks. That's what I like the most. So, Zach, who's our number 7?
Oh, that'd be Ryan Oldham.
Ryan Oldham.
Ryan
Hey, you know what? This is probably the highest he's been ranked in a long time, though, is when it comes to drafting.
Zach, this hurt my feelings.
It'll probably be.
This
I mean, it's only downhill for him from here on out. We know that, right? So, really, what's going on is he got that Mixon pick.
Good pick.
It was good. And so when you're looking at his roster and you see like his running backs are Joe Mixon and then his second running back is Chris Carson, super solid.
Yeah.
Like, you got a star running back and then like a prototypical second running back.
Right.
Wide receivers are solid. Chris Godwin, A.J. Brown, Robert Woods. Love Robert Woods at where he's being drafted this year. A.J. Brown, little bit more down on because I think Tennessee I don't know. You're counting on Ryan Tannehill to be good, and I don't think he's good. As you get and starting to look at the bench, though, like you're really hoping nobody gets hurt again.
Right.
Paris Campbell, he's going to average 3 points a game. Sony Michel, if anybody owned him last year, you know what that was like. Jordan Howard is all floor, no ceiling. Giovanni Bernard is pure handcuff.
I don't even think he's the handcuff. I don't think he's the guy you want to own there in Cincinnati. Pretty sure it's Travion Williams. Yeah.
Rashad Perryman there. Like there's this will be an easy if he's not actively taking care of this roster, it's going to be really easy to lose 2 guys and just be back at the bottom again.
Yeah, every time I look at Oldham's rosters, I always say, who's going to be the guy that he trades away? And who's he going to get in return? So I have to look at Chad's roster, and I have to analyze Oldham's roster based upon what Chad's going to look like when he has Joe Mixon. So that's what I try to do. But I did compliment Oldham. I think he had a really good draft this season. I think that he has a team that, if he keeps this team together the way it's constructed now, and he doesn't have massive injury bugs, this is a team that's going to contend for the playoffs. I have no problem saying that. Dak Prescott, regardless of how I feel about him personally as an NFL quarterback, he's a good fantasy quarterback. And so him, Mixon, Carson, Godwin, Brown, Woods, even Hunter Henry, which who knows, Philip Rivers likes to depend a lot on the tight end. But if Henry takes that step forward, stays healthy, and you have Tyrod Taylor, and now you also have Philip Lindsay, a guy who is really competing at camp, So I like Oldham's roster. I really do.
So I especially like the receivers to get Robert Woods where he got him. And I do think Woods takes a step forward this year. Having A.J. Brown as your second receiver and having Godwin as your first, that's a solid core of receivers that you're running out there. Where I kind of disagree with you guys on is the Mixon pick. Watching the games last year, I always felt Mixon wasn't the most efficient running back. It didn't feel like he was gaining. So
wait a minute, you're telling me a guy who played on a 1-win team wasn't the most efficient running back?
Hey, now don't kill me because
I'm going to.
While I was doing the research today, I had that thought and remembered. I thought about that, and I decided to look it up to see how full of shit I am. And I was telling you guys, the Football Outsiders, they have him efficiency ranked down in 18th. He's below average for an NFL running back. He's below Lindsey, Mack, Howard, Murray, Edwards, even Gus. compared to how he should have been producing, I felt like a lot of those games where he got you a lot of points, if you looked at the amount of carries he got that game, it was always high. It was always in the 25 range. And I worry about that going into this year because obviously Burrows is going to throw it. Now, you can look at that giving Mixon more value because I do think he's going to have more receptions, but I'm still iffy on him as a pick, and having him leading your running backs, I don't think is the greatest thing. I know you both will kill me for that one.
It's okay. I do have to play the contrarian a little bit to this. Number one, when you think about Joe Mixon last season, you have to think about an offensive line that ranked nearly to the bottom of the league. And that's a fan observation. Number two, you have to also take into account that Andy Dalton does not know how to check the ball down. Andy Dalton struggles with pocket pressure. He struggles with making sure he's moving his feet. So what a typical quarterback would do, right, is you step up in the pocket and you dump it off. And that's where Joe Mixon, when he got those dump offs, had a lot of success. You look at what Joe Burrow brings to the table. Pocket presence like a 10-year veteran. So when I see him take that next step, I go, okay, Joe Mixon goes from, the 30 to 40 receptions to the 45 to 55. And out of that, let's say he uses that efficiency to give himself 2 more touchdowns. Where does that put him in rankings? That puts him last season at running back 7. And so that's just adding 10 receptions to his game and two touchdowns. Do I think this offense took a step forward in the offseason? 100%. Their offensive line has improved. We have a left tackle coming back, and I'm saying we at this point. You have a Hall of Fame wide receiver coming back to this offense, and you have arguably the greatest quarterback prospect to come into this league, other than maybe John Elway. And now here we are, and so when I look at Joe Mixon, I say this is a guy who just got the money, who's ready to run wild, who's ready to be involved in an offense that's going to feature a guy who can catch the ball and run it. And how many running backs were left on the board when Joe Mixon was picked that we can honestly say is going to get 20 carries and about 7 to 8 targets a game?
So I will walk back. I shouldn't have said he was a bad pick. I would just say, I don't know. I guess it might be a feeling thing, or just after watching him last year, you're right. He took dump-off passes and turned them into 20, 30 yards. But watching him run, I feel like it looked like him not making the right cuts, not hitting the hole hard enough. And I could be wrong, and this is something that, in a couple weeks you can be like, hey, Ben, remember when you said that really stupid fucking thing?
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to hold to it right now. I'm going to hold to it right now, and you can come at me in a couple weeks.
No.
I think Joe Mixon's one of the most undervalued guys this season for all the reasons I just gave, because we're drafting him based upon an offense that finished 1-15 last year. And we're basing it off of an offensive line that played terrible last year, and off of a defense that also had an awful negative game script that just included or added so many high-level profile, free agents, that this is now a team that's going to stay within contention. Going into the fourth quarter, you won't have a guy getting game scripted out like Joe Mixon was. So I don't know. He's a guy I know I'm really high on. I know Zach is as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so number 6.
I
can't hear you. Who dey. So number 6, Zach, who do you have in your rankings?
Oh, Chad.
Oh, yes.
Really?
Next. So having the Kamara and DeAndre Hopkins tandem is fantastic.
It is.
I love it. Starting QB for him is Josh Allen, which I don't think is so fantastic. I like to it's personal preference. I like my quarterbacks to actually be able to throw.
Oh, that's weird.
At least some.
Overrated.
Hey, sweet running stats though in fantasy can sometimes.
But so you're really counting on Josh Allen to get rushing touchdowns in order to get your points. So you're talking. So that's going to be hit or miss week to week. So the weeks that he doesn't get them, we're okay taking the losses there, or just hope that, I don't know. That's not how I want to run my roster. Keenan Allen right now is his flex wide receiver. He's one of my favorite wide receivers in the whole league. Chad definitely drafted Cooper Kupp because he can't. You got to have.
Can't not draft Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, he can't not. So Cooper Kupp to me is a great receiver too. The Juju Smith-Schuster pick, I don't know. It really troubled me last year when he, you can see wide receivers who can still succeed when they don't have a good quarterback. I know my keeper was Kenny Golladay, had shit quarterbacking
Awful.
most of the year, awful. Still did okay. You can still do okay if you're that guy. And I don't think Juju is that guy. And so that kind of worries me, like, even with Big Ben there. I don't know. I don't know if he's it, because the time when he was successful, he also had the best wide receiver in the league at the time opposite of him. So when you get down to the bench, he's got, this is where I think when we talk about rookie strategies, this is where like the Jay strategy versus the Chad strategy. So he's got Cam Akers and Justin Jefferson, but on his bench.
Right.
He doesn't have to start them. He can. He's got Chenault there too, and he can wait and see what happens. And then if they hit, he can actually put them into their lineup and trade out some of those pieces. I really like that approach, especially this year with the contracted off season and all that kind of stuff. Big questions for me are David Johnson. I love David Johnson, but it's been a couple years, and but to me, that's probably the biggest question mark there for him.
Yeah, I do think that, it's interesting. He took Cam Newton as well, and I think Cam Newton's someone who, I'm interested to see what he can do for New England. He's been named the starter now. As you mentioned, Cam Akers being on his bench, Austin Hooper for a little bit more depth with Hayden Hurst. I think Fitzka Chenault could be interesting. The Jags are going to be a team that's going to tinker and play around a little bit. Chenault can run running back. We saw him do it in Colorado. I would not be surprised to see him be more of a gadgety type player and someone who could be utilized in a, this is very, very, very high ceiling, but in kind of an Austin Eckler type role. Where they line him up in the backfield and utilize him as a primary pass catcher coming out of there, especially with all of the, functional problems right now with the Jacksonville Jaguars organization. But I do agree. I think Kamara being handcuffed with Murray, excellent job there by him. I look at Cooper Kupp being the wide receiver 2 of this team, Juju more like the wide receiver 3, and that's in comparison with Keenan Allen, who I think, I'd rather have Keenan Allen over Juju even. But I think Juju is one of those guys who has one good game. Everyone says, "Oh, he's back." Chad will capitalize, trade him to Oldham, get Joe Mixon. So let's just.
Oh man. Yeah. So I don't know. Looking at some of it's really strange that like he got some of the best value in the draft, and then some of the what the hell value out of the draft. Like to get Kupp and Keenan Allen as late as he did. Fucking standing. DeAndre Hopkins that late in the first round. I talked about it earlier. I thought that was one of the best value picks in that first round. And then you see, he got an extra third round pick, and he goes David Johnson.
Right.
And at that time, like, I'm guessing looking for a running back, but at that time you have safer people and people who have still been producing. Let me see. Around that time, you had Mark Ingram come off the board, who's still a stud, remarkably. Le'Veon Bell, James Conner, Devin Singletary. There was running backs I feel like he could have snagged right there, or he could have even went receiver and gotten Lockett, A.J. Green, A.J. Brown. So I think he got great value at those couple picks. And then the David Johnson was what threw me for a loop. Like if I was getting an extra third-round pick and I picked David Johnson, I would hate myself. Then, Josh Allen, I'd argue with you, Zach, that I don't think, you can count on 9 rushing touchdowns a year, but I think he's athletic enough and, he's going to finish near the top 10 for quarterbacks, and I think that can be pretty steady for him. Kamara is going to be huge. I think Hayden Hurst is a great tight end pick. Matt Ryan throws to their tight ends. Hooper showed that last year, so it's kind of on Hurst to produce, as opposed to not knowing if Hurst is going to get that role. Honestly, Cam Akers is one of the running backs I was trying to get, and I think he is set up the best, him and Dobbins, at having the chance to have some of the better rookie years, as opposed to, later picks, like, getting Clyde or Jonathan Taylor. But to get Akers where he got him was great. And I think Zach was also right. He has 3 rookies, but they're on his bench. He's not counting on them to come up for him. And, like Brad, you said, he's going to trade off one of these guys. He's going to trade Rape Oldie, and we're going to look at Chad being in the final 2, final 4 of the league like we have the last 2 years. So I think this roster is a little better than what do we have him ranked 6th?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's ranked 6th. But I do think that the variable to all of this is what we all know about Chad is that Chad is good for one big trade every single year.
Yep.
And so whatever, he has a lot of marketable names, guys that have one big up week. It's going to be a big trade that he's able to pull off.
Oh.
And, you have to look at this bench and see guys like Cam Akers, if he develops into that starter role week 1, Cam Newton, Austin Hooper, guys who are going to be wanted that can be packaged into trades. We all know it's coming. It's coming sooner or later. So, Zach, number 5 on your list, and we got to kind of keep it moving. We're going up against a time limit now for Zoom call recording. So, who is your number 5?
Well, it's you.
Oh, wow.
You're number 5th. So things that
I just thought you forgot about me.
No, things that I like. A super deep bench there that you drafted. A lot of these guys would be starters on other people's teams. David Montgomery, Antonio Gibson, Preston Williams, I think is awesome. Robbie Anderson's going to have a role. There's a lot of great players, I think, on the bench. I think Nick Chubb could be the best running back in fantasy, even with Kareem Hunt taking touches, keeping him fresh, though. I think he could just be amazing. One of the things that I didn't necessarily like strategy-wise was getting both Odell Beckham and A.J. Green, because you're hoping for 2 bounce-back years for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
I like both of the players. I would have taken either one of them.
Right.
But I think having both on your team, and well as having like Deshaun Jackson there, like you didn't necessarily go very safe. Like I probably would have mitigated some of my risk there. Not that I don't love the picks or the players, I just probably wouldn't have done both on the same team.
I think that's fair. And I'll say exactly what was on my mind because I drafted AJ Green earlier, and I think any mock I had seen. And the reason why I drafted AJ Green where I did was because the most important thing about fantasy football is the fun factor. And AJ Green has been a long time my favorite player in this league. He's someone who, when I watched him live at practices, I always enjoyed watching him. But now there's a new added element, right? There's Joe Burrow in town. And so when I looked at the roster constructions and I saw where AJ Green was likely going to go in the rounds where I drafted him, I didn't think he was going to make it back to me. I honestly thought Jay would grab him up and he'd be his locked-in wide receiver too, and I was worried about that. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to watch Bengals games anyways. I want to watch it with a little bit more strategy and something else hanging in the balance on it. I don't want to have to click over and watch the Browns because I drafted Odell, which I do believe Odell hurt last year. I think there's a lot of, if no one reads Matt Harmon, the reception perception that he puts together every single year, analyzes what a wide receiver should have produced based upon his routes, and it shows that he certainly was ailed by something last year. All reports out of camp means he looks great. But that's where this added fun comes in, because I look at it as an Odell Beckham and A.J. Green. They could absolutely lose me a week. There's no doubt about that. But I also look at it as a damn, it's going to be fun watching them. And as a Bengals fan, I enjoy that aspect of it. And so this year I took a brand new strategy to what I normally do. Every year I press to try to get the guys who I say, this is my guy this year. This guy's going to break out. This guy's going to do it. From years ago with Ryan Matthews, that's a name pulling it right out of my ass from a long time ago, to, of course, Miles Austin. So guys that I was always really high on, that I would just grab them. And now I came back around to say, you know what? I'm just going to draft the guys who I enjoy. I enjoy watching them. I think this makes sense. This is going to be fun. Raheem Mostert, he's a Purdue guy, and I enjoyed watching his playoff run last year. And so I was like, you know what? Boil her up all the way, baby. So that's a little – and Antonio Gibson was a must-have to me coming into this draft. This was, of course, before the news of AP, but he was a must-own for me. And so that's someone who I thought had a league-winning type potential that is that could come in and be that top guy for me. So that's just a little trip of a reason why. But I actually agree with your rankings because I had myself written down as number 5. So there you go.
Yeah, awesome.
What really pops out to me is the sheer goddamn depth of your running backs. Like, and, the roles that they're already playing in their team. Like, you obviously didn't know about Gibson, but now it looks like he's going to have a chance to be that guy in Washington. Carry-on, I still think the Lions like him a lot, and I think it's going to be his job to lose. Whether he does that or not, who knows? Montgomery, I still think they're going to keep running the ball with him. They're going to ignore Cohen like they always that they did last year. They shouldn't, but that's what's going to happen. And, Raheem, I'm a big Purdue guy. To watch him go off in the playoffs was awesome. There's not too many times when Breeze isn't on the field that you can say boiler up during an NFL game.
True.
And then your receivers, I think you got great value. Getting Devontae Adams, I think, is great. Odell, he's just one of those players where I'm like, I don't want you, Odell. If I draft you, it's too early, and then you're going to, blow out 5 knees somehow. The pick, I think that if this team wins, the pick that I think wins it is the Russell Wilson. I think I started the kind of mid quarterback rush after the first 2, obviously of Jackson and Mahomes, when I drafted Kyler Murray, and that started a big chain of it. But for you to get Russell Wilson in that spot, I think is fantastic. What we saw him do last year, carrying that team and still putting up what did he finish last year? Yeah, position ranked 3.
Right.
After last year, he put that team on his back. He has 2 great receivers. I'm assuming the running game is going to be the same. I think that's the pick that ends up winning it because I think you have so much, like you keep saying, floor. I think this team is just so steady on what they're going to be scoring. The fact that you have Wilson, I think in some games is going to take you over the top.
All right, Zach, who's your number 4 in this league?
That would be Joey Vanglorious.
Oh, boy.
Man.
He's going to be so mad, though, because he just called me today and was like, my team's so good. So
his team really is so good.
It is pretty good.
It is.
Yeah.
The Aaron Jones, Mark Ingram running back combo, I really enjoy that. Those would be 2 running backs that I would definitely have on my team. His wide receivers, having Michael Thomas, it's amazing. Yeah. Tyler Boyd, so consistent. Julian Edelman's kind of a question how that goes. We know he's good, but what's it going to look like this year? Michael Gallup, being able to get George Kittle at tight end and still have all that caliber of starters across the board. The other guys that took tight end that early, we don't see starters of this caliber across the board for their teams. So that puts Joe up pretty high. The problem is when you look at the bench, any injury and it all goes away. I think he's got James White there. Who knows what that role will be? Golden Tate, Cole Beasley. He's starting Joe Burrow or Jared Goff at quarterback. Then Joe Burrow was the I want to watch the guy and root for him pick. Yeah. But there's not. Somebody will get hurt. Like we know this year with the shortened preseason, people are going to get hurt at a higher rate. Like probably even like I did some research today, and from a lot of places are saying like it could be as many as 30% more injuries in the first several months of the season. So these guys that don't have a lot of depth on the bench, they could lose several of these early weeks just by not having super solid guys they can plug in.
Yep. I'm not so as high on this team as you are. To get Aaron Jones and Michael Thomas, Aaron Jones finished second in running backs last year. Michael Thomas obviously first. It's spectacular. The parts Tyler Boyd, maybe now that AJ Green is back, he kind of had the same thing as Juju, that his best plays were, when AJ was in there taking attention off of him. I think he's a great number 2, but I'm I'm curious to see how well he does. I think he was drafted a little too high for what he did last year. Mark Ingram, I think it's just doubting him every year is stupid, but I feel like Dobbins, and what I've read, might start taking touches from him. And I think there's going to be even more of a committee role with those runners. Edelman is always solid. Gallup, I'm questioning, Gallup, how much does CD kind of eat into Gallup's touches? I know they really like him out there, but you don't draft a receiver in the first round if you don't have a spot for him. So can you count on all three of those guys to get touches? I'm not sure. And then I have the same problems with this bench. You're talking about Russell Gage. When are you ever really going to start him unless there's an injury? Jack Doyle, who as a Colts fan, I'm confused on why you would just even have him as your backup tight end. There's people that you can have in that spot, and if you need to stream a tight end, stream a tight end. You have George Kittle, and I don't see Jack Doyle being at that high of an upside guy that I would use a bench spot for him. And then, James White, I have a big rule over the last couple of years of I will not touch a New England Patriot running back, and I think he's a great example of that because he's been the most productive out of there, and yet you have Sony Michel come in taking carries, fumbling those carries. You have these players they pick up out of the grocery store and throw them back there that somehow gain 150 yards. Then Belichick takes them out back and shoots them. And I don't know. I see this team as very sketchy in my mind. And I just don't see him being a consistent performer. I think they score high points and have some weeks where it's just going to look like Thomas and Aaron Jones were the only ones scoring for him.
Well, not a lot to add, but I will say a great exercise to do with every single one of these teams is take two of their players out and sub in two of their best bench players and see how their roster looks. I look at this team and I go, if we do that and we take out, let's say, a Mark Ingram who loses touches and a Julian Edelman, and now you're looking at a James White, Golden Tate into this offense and into this scoring attack. Do we see it really move the needle? And so I think that what Joe drafted is a really good all-around starting core with the right amount of upside and the right amount of floor. But the problem is if injuries hit this team, this is a team that could go from fourth in this rankings to first if he has no injuries to last really quickly. And I think that's the interesting thing about all these teams. So Zach, hit us with your number 3.
Number 3 would be the team that Nick drafted and now John is in charge of.
All right, the Hamilton County Cougar Hunters, John York.
That's the best name in the league right now, I think.
Yeah.
So,
are we considering this a post-trade or pre-trade?
Oh, we're considering this post. This is current, right? This current day.
Current. Yep. So what I have here, the running backs, the Christian McCaffrey, Clyde Edwards-Helaire combo is pretty amazing. Would I have drafted necessarily Clyde where he was taken that early, being a rookie running back coming in? Probably not. But it would be stupid to ignore what could happen or even what's most likely to happen with somebody like him in that offense. Like, there's a lot of downside. Not a lot. There is definite downside. But if we're all thinking about what's probably going to happen, he's probably going to be awesome.
We're looking at Kareem Hunt from a few years ago, right? Yeah. I mean, Kareem Hunt's rookie year. So a top 5 fantasy finish.
And then with his wide receivers, Landry, Shark, McLaurin, and Marvin Jones, who I think is a steal for how late he was going in drafts. It's super solid. There's not a standout, obviously, like top-tier wide receiver. Counting on DJ Shark to keep his momentum going. Terry McLaurin as well. So a couple young guys that you're hoping just continue to improve, but super solid, really. And then if you look down at the bench, having Kareem Hunt, I know he took him super early, more early than we would have hoped, but he's easily a plug-and-play person there. N'Keal Harry, he's got Fournette down there. There's lots of this is a bench too where when one of these guys up top gets hurt, there are options.
Exactly.
Also, I see T.J. Hawkinson, and Brad is going to trade for him.
I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
Well, that's what with this team. Just all right. So just imagine for me that in that Clyde spot, is still Jonathan Taylor, and this team had Michael Thomas as well. We would be talking about this being the number one team. But with Clyde and the team he has right now, Jarvis Landry is always consistent. Having McCaffrey is just like a cheat code in fantasy at this point. I mean, I don't know how you plan against him, but I'm curious how the offense uses him. I mean, there is a new coordinator, new quarterback. So is he coming out and having the same outstanding year he just had? The receivers, I love Scary Terry. I think he's one of the bigger upside picks. And, it kind of blows my mind that he was able to get this team when taking Kareem Hunt that early. When we look at a lot of these teams, they're like, oh, look at that. That was a bad pick. That was a bad pick. It usually shows later in their roster because, it's just bad. And this one's not. The running backs, I think, are great positions to take jobs. I'm not the biggest Miles Sanders fan, and I think Boston Scott has the ability to take touches. Kareem Hunt, if Chubb even gets hurt, or actually, he's probably going to be planned into the game.
Mm-hmm.
Chase Edmonds, with us just talking earlier about Kenyon Drake having injury concerns, he's in a great position. And then Leonard Fournette, how long, into the season until they just start ramming him up the middle? Yeah, this team's set up to win, especially after that trade to just fill out that bottom half of the roster. Just it's stacked. The only one I don't like is the Marvin Jones. I don't think he's going to have the year that he has again. He was very big play. Personally, I had him on my team. That's how I know. But he did not have, a consistent floor. It was always either he got me 3 points or he had some crazy 60-yard catch and got me the 14, 15 points that week. So to count –
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're okay. Just to count on that weekly is tough. But if that's your biggest concern, you have a great team.
Well, I won't eat too much more time, but I will say that it seems like a team that's invested in the Detroit offense, and I am very much so this season. I believe they take a giant leap forward. I do think that this team ultimately hinges on Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's availability and his role in that offense. But at the end of the day, what I look at when I see this team is what's the temperament of the owner? And knowing John York, knowing he's very patient with his players, he's someone who's not going to be reactionary as the previous owner sometimes was with some of his players. This is someone who's going to continue to build off of the roster he already has, not trade these key pieces, but maybe look to trade some of those depth pieces, the Leonard Fournettes, the Kareem Hunts, the TJ Hawkinsons, to upgrade those starters even more. I think this is a team that on paper and, come middle of December is going to be very scary for anyone facing them. So, Zach, we're down to the final two. You had told us in the pre-show who you picked as number one. I want to go ahead and preference this right now because I know that Jay is going to be the first one to complain. We had no input on these rankings. We're only giving our opinions on Zach's rankings. So, Zach, who was number two out of you or Curtis?
Oh, it's definitely Curtis.
The LC Nightmare coming in second in Zach's personal ranking. So walk us through your thought process on this one.
Well, my thought process was, of course, I'm number one.
Of course.
So, you can be butthurt about that, but that would be silly. First off, his running back situation is really fucking formidable.
It's the best in the league. There's not a question. You can't question Saquon Barkley and Zeke Elliott.
No. Having Melvin Gordon as your flex as well is pretty amazing. And then the wide receivers that he has going along with it. Adam Thielen, do we expect him, like, range of outcomes, he's probably going to be, the 14th wide receiver? If I had to guess, if I had to put an over-under on where he finished.
High floor. Yeah, just a high floor.
T.Y. Hilton, we know he's good. Up and down, hurt last year, but he's good. Stephon Diggs is a great wide receiver. I wish he had somebody who could actually throw the ball throwing it to him. That would be better. But, Josh Allen has a cannon. So, there's going to be some games where he blows up. I really do like this team. Early in the year, he's gonna roll some teams, I think, early on, and then we just have to see if they stay healthy, because like some other teams, it looks like there's very little upside on his bench. Having to plug Larry Fitzgerald in, he's not going to want to do that. But if somebody gets hurt, he's going to have to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that what stood out to me at least on this roster is it doesn't have a dependency on really anyone having to do anything spectacular. Because when you have Zeke, Saquon, Thielen, Thielen just a few years ago was a wide receiver 1 up through halfway through the season, still finished as a wide receiver 1 on the year, and last year showed great promise with doing the same thing. You have Melvin Gordon, so there's such a great floor to this team, but I really hate the tight end position for him, because I do not believe that, everyone talks about running back by committee. The Rams are a tight end by committee. And they have Higbee, they have Everett, and they have Bryson Hopkins, which I could say boiler up one more time. But he also made the roster for them as well. I see the Rams offense as being someone who I would avoid the tight end position, because I don't know who I want to start week in after week. But I don't think that that's going to matter. He could get 4 points out of that position and still be fine. Matt Ryan was a solid steal of the quarterback position. And as I look through this roster, I even look at the bench. I think Darrell Henderson, we don't know. He was just a high draft pick last year, and everyone would make the same argument that he was last year's Cam Akers. So we don't know what we're going to see out of this offense. But I do believe that this is one of the more well-rounded. And I think that if you just cover up Zeke and Saquon, you look at this team, you're like, but then you remember there's Zeke and Saquon sitting right there. And as long as you're playing those two, you can pretty much bank on having about 35 to 40 points posted on you from just the running back position. There won't be a time this year where going into the week, you are playing against this team and you don't have a disadvantage at the running back position.
Yep. And that is being huge. There's going to be weeks where those two put up 60 and completely just steamroll you before you can even get anybody going. Some of my concerns with it, tight end, yes, any of the Rams tight ends, I would see them as more streaming options and not so much as I was going to go out and get them. Melvin Gordon, as high as other people are on him, he had the chance to come back and be the guy for the Chargers, and he wasn't. Now, after having a full offseason with the team, with the Broncos, could he come back to that? He could. But after seeing, I still think that by the first, 4 or 5 games, we see Phillip Lindsay start to eat more up into his touches. T.Y. Hilton hurt again, and it's something as a Colts fan where it's just like, man, just the potential there. It's there, but he doesn't always realize it through injuries. But these are small complaints. Like when you have Zeke and Saquon, this team's going to make the playoffs, and I think it's going to depend on him and some lucky breaks that he loses it.
All right. Well, Zach, walk us through your thought process of why you are number 1 on your power rankings, and then we will tell you why we debate with you on this.
That's fine, but I'm right.
Let's hear it.
So, Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. He's been a QB1 how many times?
A lot, except for last year.
Except for last year, right?
Fair enough, yeah.
Or the year before.
He came at a huge discount because of 1 year's worth of productivity versus.
I don't care about the quarterback. Let's talk about this team.
Anyway, that's fine. Todd Gurley and Le'Veon Bell also have both been number 1 RBs. Not top 12, but the number 1 running back. They are both under 30 still.
Okay.
So new situations, some injury issues. There's some issues there, but if you're talking about the upside that these two have, it's absolutely huge. The wide receiver positions, you've got Galladay, Tyreek Hill, and Brandon Cooks. All 3 of those guys also have been top 10 wide receivers. Galladay's on his way up. Tyreek Hill could be the number 1 receiver. He would be my bet. Brandon Cooks, as long as nobody touches his head, top 10 wide receiver. Now, concussions are, hit or miss, and mostly you get them when you get hit, but hopefully they're missing this year. Zach Ertz fell really far.
Yes, he did.
Super far. I didn't want to take a tight end early. I've talked about how I think that's a shitty strategy all night here. But he just fell too far. Like, there was no other role players that made even a modicum of sense compared to him. J.K. Dobbins is the rookie running back that I think is, besides Edwards-Helaire, in the best situation. I think he's more talented than Edwards-Helaire in some ways. And I think that situation is one of those few situations that can support 2 top 10 running backs because of Lamar Miller and the rushing attack that they have. And then
Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, who'd I say?
Lamar Miller, but you know what? If they go out and get him, who gives a shit at this point?
Lamar Jackson. I got the Lamar part right.
There you go.
And then off the bench, you've got Matt Breida, a starter. Mike Williams, the top. No, he's not the top, but an awesome wide receiver for the Chargers. Mecole Hardman could hit. He could really hit in that offense. Alshon Jeffrey, when he gets healthy. Emmanuel Sanders could be in my flex if J.K. Dobbins starts slow. I don't know. I'm just super excited.
All right. Ben, take it, and then I'll take it as well. Go ahead.
Okay.
Lay it on him.
So to have Le'Veon and Todd Gurley as your top 2 running backs is just, I'm sorry, horrendous. Fantasy doesn't go off of how well they played before, but what they're playing. And looking at both of them, I don't usually trust any running back that averages below 4 yards. I think that's kind of the true show of a running back of how you gain. And both of them, Le'Veon at 3.2 last year, Todd Gurley at 3.8. Gurley really only scoring the way he did by getting those touchdowns late in the season. I think Kenny Golladay was a great pick by you. Tyreek Hill, the fact that that's your number 1 and number 2. They're both somebody I could see ending the season as the number 1 wide receiver, and I wouldn't be surprised. Cooks, I definitely would have stayed away from. I'm wondering how they use him in that offense, and I think Texans have a growing pains without Hopkins and how much they relied on being able to just throw to him. And I'm curious if that offense reaches how good they were last year. Ertz, I think, was a great pick of where you got him. I'm just curious how his contract situation goes with the team. Last I saw, they were pretty much, he denied it because, they offered him less money. Dobbins, I think, is probably your best pick. I do think him and a couple of the other rookies have the best chances of breaking out this year. I don't know if Ingram keeps him down like he's kept every young running back around him, but we'll see. Bench, though, is where you kind of lost me. Tony Pollard at this point, when do we really see Zeke hurt? And it's not a position to where they're sharing touches very much. Mecole Hardman, I think, is a good pick, but comes down to the Chiefs and how many mouths there are to feed there. Now Mahomes slings it better than anybody else in the league, so if anybody, I could see him. I think your best bench player is Emmanuel Sanders, especially where you got him. I think he has a big year with Breeze, and I think any receiver playing opposite of Michael Thomas is going to have a decent year, especially when you have the talent that he does. But I see this as more of a middle-of-the-pack team, to be honest, just because of the running backs. And you say they're, not 30, but they're old. They're old in NFL years. The Gurley's carrying the knees of 40-year-old. But what do you think, Brad?
All right. So my first assessment of this is Le'Veon Bell. And this is what I have to think about. This is a butthole, and that's who he plays for, is a coach that is a butthole. Because Adam Gase does not know how to use talent. And we saw it with Kenyon Drake in Miami. We saw it with Devontae Parker in Miami. We saw it with the multiple shortcomings with the Jets last season. And what I see so far in training camp and all of their practices and scrimmages is a near 50-50 split between him and my father, Frank Gore. So when I look at Le'Veon Bell, I say, wow, he is someone who has a lot of talent and plays in the worst possible situation. And do I think that this is a team that with Sam Darnold, 0 wide receiving weapons, is a team that's able to maintain a lead? Absolutely not. Do I think Le'Veon Bell is excellent at catching the ball out of the backfield? Absolutely. Do I think he'll be on the field, though? That comes back to the butthole comment, and it's a no. Because I think that in those situations, we're going to see a lot of Adam Gase doing Adam Gase things and forgetting about Le'Veon Bell. I think Le'Veon Bell is an excellent trade candidate, not in the real or not in fantasy, but in real life, because I do see him becoming someone that in the first few weeks, if the Jets start to struggle, becomes a guy that becomes available for a team that needs him. That's where I think Le'Veon Bell's value is going to really bloom and come into. I've not held anything back about Kenny Golladay. I think he finishes the season as the wide receiver 1 overall. I am a huge Kenny Golladay fan because I'm a huge Lions offensive fan for this season. Tyreek Hill is going to win you a week, guaranteed at this point. I am not a big Brandon Cooks fan from a health perspective, but when he's on the field, he is a top 20 wide receiver in this league. I think that it's hard to justify anything outside of that because I've not seen him in an offense that is built more around his skill sets. I think that we saw it at times with the Rams, but we saw Kupp, we saw Woods, we saw a lot of mouths to feed there. But when I look at the Houston Texans offense, outside of Will Fuller, who we all know is going to last probably 3 to 4 weeks, Brandon Cooks is going to be that wide receiver 1. Deshaun Watson is a phenomenal quarterback, and so I do think that the upside play is there. So I look at this roster and I say, wow, if Dobbins, wow, if Le'Veon Bell gets traded, wow, if Brandon Cooks stays healthy, a lot of ifs. And so it's hard for me to justify it being number 1 in the rankings. But this is one of those teams that, again, it comes down to if I'm playing them in December, I'm terrified. If I'm playing them in week 4 and I'm projecting it out, I'm going, as long as Le'Veon Bell hasn't been traded yet, I'll feel pretty good about my matchup. So that's where I look at it. But I think that overall, when we look at these rankings, which I'll recap in a moment, I think that it's fair that you justify yourself as number 1. I think everyone in the league has agreed, maybe other than Jay, that they could say their team's the number 1 team in the league. And so when what we just talked about, with the top 6 teams, those are teams that you project as playoff teams. Didn't see a lot of argument from us. Ryan, Ben and Cody being the tier guys. And then we saw a tier break there with Tyler, Nick, and then even another tier break with Jay. But, as we go down, 12 was Jay, the icon. 11, Nick Clevenger with the Williamsburg Yellow Jackets. 10, Tyler with the Hamilton Hogs. 9, Cody, Mr. Bucks Aplenty. 8, Ben, and the disrespect of the R-Town Hulkamaniacs. Number 7, Ryan. Number 7, Ryan Oldham, the Cordsville Beavers. Number 6, Chad Kircher with the Greens Fork Black Demons. Number 5, myself with the Northside Kings. Number 4, Joey Vaglorious. Number 3, the new owner, John York. Number 2, Curtis. And number 1, you had yourself ranked. But argument's sake, I think the consensus where I put these was I had Curtis as number 1. And, so I would say that running back attack is just a little too much. Now, what I do know about Curtis is he won't make any trades. He's always afraid to make those trades. And so if his roster starts to go downhill or he has an injury, this then becomes, to me, a very wide open race between about 7 teams. And Ben, just so you know, I had you ranked 6th in my personal rankings. So I obviously love you more.
In the playoffs, like I like it.
That's right. So
I would just like point out, I'm the only person in this league who has 100% playoff average every year. That's only 2, but I'm there every year.
Okay, well, moving on. No, so I would agree with that assessment, Ben. Obviously, that's factual. So sad to see it's going to come in this year. But, as we go through, the big thing about week 1 in the FFL, what's unique about the FFL is week 1, week 13, roto weeks. Everyone plays everyone. Top 6 scorers get the win. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that, but what I will tell you guys is the format of this league review, as we're wrapping up now, is once a week we're going to have a review. It should be pretty short. This one was our long kickoff one, had to cover the draft. We had a lot of topics we wanted to cover. Each week you're going to see this be between 20 to 25 minutes per episode. We'd like to bring on the highest scorer in the league, and our goal throughout the league year is to bring every single owner on at one point for an episode. We'd like to have multiple owners on if there's a rivalry that's formed, if there's a stat correction that led to a victory. Shout out to Jay for that one. If there is, a major trade that went down the league, these are the type of things we'll review, we'll talk about, we'll make sure we bring other owners in. So, guys, parting thoughts on the FFL for 2020. What's something you're really looking forward to? Ben, I'll start with you.
Parity. Honestly, when we went back through these teams, besides Jay, everybody has a chance of making the playoffs. And I hate to say that about Oldie, but he even has a pretty great chance coming out of here. I think a lot of that has to yet again do with no preseason. We haven't seen these guys. All we hear about is, how great this player is in camp, and teams never lie about that. So I think, honestly, it is going to be the parity. I think this is a season where we might have one or two, I wouldn't say super teams, but teams that are a little ahead of the pack. And then I think we're going to have a big fight for those last couple playoff games. And I always think that's amazing in a fantasy league. And I'm excited about that.
Yep. All right, Zach, last thoughts before we wrap up.
I really think this year will be about flexibility. The football season, there's going to be stuff that happens that we can't foresee. They might cancel games. They might do some stuff. More people are going to get hurt. Like, it's almost a guarantee. So what owners can be flexible? And then as we're kind of navigating all this together, I would recommend, let's just all trust Brad. He's been running this league. When they cancel games, when the shit's going to happen that we can't possibly guess is going to happen. They might not, no teams might play one Sunday. If there happens to be another thing like happened in the NBA, we're just going to have to be flexible, and then definitely trust Brad because he's got us through 15 years, and let's keep going.
Yeah, well, it's been a rough 15 years on my psyche and my physicality. But what I will say with some of the parting words is I agree. A lot of parity in this league. I also agree there's going to be the unknown that we're faced with. But what I do know, and I want to encourage everyone, is to remember the purpose of this league. It was never just about winning a championship and bragging to your friends. But the key word of that, and what I want to remind everyone is friends. We started this league when we went to Frickers for a draft night as a wild idea between a bunch of college buddies. I, at the time, barely really knew Zach. I knew Chad, I knew Tim, and I knew Oldham, and a few of the former owners that we had. But we started off as an 8-man league, and we started this off because we said we wanted something to remind ourselves every single year of why we became friends. And so as I look throughout this league, there's some changes that happened this last week. But I want to remind you guys that you may not like each other. You may not like the ideas that you have when it comes to politics. You may not like each other's ideas when it comes to social issues. But at the end of the day, the thing that combines us as friends is football. And so don't lose sight of that. Throughout the year, talk shit to each other. Rub each other's noses and things. But when it's personal, that person's going to tell you. They'll either tell you in the group message or they'll text you on the side. Don't feel like you have to perpetuate it because you have to show how much of a man you are. I promise you in this league, every single person has had events, and there's something that we have shown that we're not fully men, okay? So no one here is slanging the biggest dick. No one here is getting off like it's no big deal. And no one here has a reason to be cocky. We are all in this as friends. And just a reminder, play as such, because at the end of the day, when a league member leaves this league, we remember the impact that they had. We remember the friendships that we have, and we continue to talk to them. We're going to have turmoil throughout the rest of this year. We're probably going to have turmoil throughout the rest of this. But I hope every single owner that's watching this remembers that every single person in this league is here because they want to be here, because this is the best league in America, and goddamn, it's going to stay the best league in America. So keep doing what you need to do. Keep texting as you are, but remember at the end of the day, any more threats to a fight, and I'm going to fucking kill all of you. All right. Love you guys. Take care. We'll see you again next week.
Yeah, love you too. Bye.